The dust settled around the old blue pickup truck as it came to a stop in front of the weathered farmhouse. Sarah clutched her worn suitcase tighter, her knuckles white against the brown leather handle. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the property, and she could hear the distant lowing of cattle somewhere beyond the rolling hills. She had never imagined her life would come to this. 3 months ago, she had been living with her stepfamily in town, enduring their constant criticism about her weight and their complaints about the cost of feeding her. When her stepmother announced that Sarah would be married off to old farmer Thomas Miller as punishment for being a burden, Sarah's heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. "He's desperate enough to take anyone," her stepmother had said with cruel satisfaction. "Even someone like you. At least you'll be his problem now, not ours." The truck door creaked as it opened, and Thomas Miller stepped out. He was a large man with kind eyes and a full gray beard, wearing a faded blue work shirt that had seen better days. His movements were slow and deliberate, like someone who had learned patience through years of working the land. "You must be Sarah," he said gently, his voice carrying the soft drawl of someone who had spent his entire life in these hills. "Welcome to Miller Farm." Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice. She had expected harsh words, maybe even cruelty. Instead, Thomas approached her with the same careful manner she had seen him use when helping her down from the truck. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Thomas continued, picking up her suitcase without being asked. "Truth is, it wasn't exactly what I had in mind either. But sometimes life has a way of bringing people together when they need each other most." The farmhouse was simple but clean, with wide wooden planks on the front porch and cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. As they walked up the steps, Sarah noticed small details that spoke of care and attention. Potted flowers by the door, a freshly painted railing, and a swing that looked like it had been recently repaired. Inside, the Obese house was modest but welcoming. The kitchen had an old wooden table that could seat 6 people, and the smell of fresh bread lingered in the air. Thomas set her suitcase down and gestured toward a chair. "Sit a spell," he said. "I imagine you're tired from the journey." As Sarah sat down, she noticed Thomas watching her with genuine concern, not the disgusted looks she had grown accustomed to from her stepfamily. There was something different about this man, something that made her feel less invisible than she had in years. "I want you to know something right from the start," Thomas said, settling into the chair across from her. "I didn't agree to this arrangement because I was desperate or because I needed someone to cook and clean. I've been managing just fine, on my own for the past 10 years since my Martha passed." Sarah looked up, surprised by his directness. "Then why?" she asked quietly. Thomas was silent for a long moment, his weathered hands folded on the table. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for who you are instead of what's in your heart. And because I figured we might both be less lonely together than we are apart." Over the following weeks, Sarah discovered that Thomas Miller was nothing like what she had expected. He was patient and kind, never raising his voice or making demands. He showed her around the property with quiet pride, pointing out the vegetable garden, the chicken coop, and the pastures where his cattle grazed. What surprised Sarah most was how much there was to see. The farm seemed to stretch on forever, with rolling hills covered in healthy grass and dozens of cattle scattered across the landscape. She had assumed Thomas was poor, given the modest farmhouse and his simple clothing, but the sheer size of his property suggested otherwise. One evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Sarah finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Thomas, how much land do you actually own?" He rocked slowly in his chair, considering his answer. "About 3,000 acres, give or take. Been in my family for 4 generations." Sarah nearly choked on her sweet tea. 3,000 acres? "Cattle ranching's been good to the Millers," Thomas said with a small smile. We may not look like much, but the land provides well. I've got contracts with processing plants in 3 states, and my cattle are some of the finest in the region. But why do you live so simply? Sarah asked, gesturing toward the modest farmhouse. Thomas's expression grew thoughtful. Martha and we never needed much to be happy. After she passed, I kept things the way she liked them. Money's just a tool, Sarah. It can't buy you the things that really matter. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah began to understand what Thomas meant. She found herself genuinely happy for the first time in years. Thomas treated her with respect and kindness, never making her feel like a burden or an obligation. He encouraged her to pursue her love of gardening, and together they expanded the vegetable plot into something truly spectacular. Sarah also discovered that she had a natural talent for managing the farm's financial records. Her attention to detail and her head for numbers impressed Thomas, who had been struggling with the paperwork side of his operation for years. "You've got a gift for this," he told her one afternoon as she organized his contracts and invoices. "I've been thinking about expanding into organic beef. Would you be interested in helping me research the market?" Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the kitchen window. For the first time in her life, someone valued her mind and her contributions. 6 months after her arrival, Sarah was in town picking up supplies when she overheard 2 women talking at the general store. "Poor old Tom Miller," one of them said, "taking in that fat girl as charity. Though I suppose he can afford it, what with all his money." "Money?" the other woman asked. "Oh my, yes. The Millers are one of the wealthiest families in the county. Tom just doesn't flaunt it like some people do." Sarah left the store with a new understanding. Her stepfamily had sent her away thinking they were dumping her on a poor farmer who would be grateful for any help he could get. They had no idea they had unknowingly given her to one of the most successful ranchers in the region. But more importantly, Sarah realized that Thomas had never mentioned his wealth because it wasn't important to him. He had seen something in her that her own family had missed: her worth as a person. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Sarah looked across the table at the man who had become her anchor in the storm of life. "Thomas," she said softly, "I want you to know that I'm grateful, not for the money or the land, but for the way you see me." Thomas reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "Sarah, girl, you've brought more joy to this old farmhouse than it's seen in years. I should be thanking you." As the sun set over Miller Farm, Sarah Miller, for she had taken his name in a quiet ceremony the month before, felt truly at home for the first time in her life. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as punishments, and sometimes the people who seem to have the least to offer have the most to give. The farm would continue to prosper under their joint care, but more importantly, 2 lonely hearts had found their way to each other across the vast landscape of human kindness.